that they'll be moving forward on this year. Turner School District is adding on into their area, as is Bonner Springs and the Piper School Districts, where they're adding a new middle school. We're doing community master planning. We just completed what we did with the Northeast Master Plan and are starting that of the Central Area Master Plan. Our crime rate is down across the community by 11%, and our homicides have dropped by 14.5%. So very positive operational things we're doing. Infrastructure, a couple of the large projects. We announced the Turner Diagonal project in conjunction with Turner Logistics. It's a $28 million infrastructure project that puts in more of a $150 million development, and we're on our second phase of Leavenworth Road. And across the community, our property values are up, showing that people are reinvesting and investing in our community. Key objectives that I'm looking at in building this year's budget. Number one, I look at it, what are the commission goals? And the 6 goals that we have out there, we go through, structure those in, lay those out to the departments when they start to do this and they understand which areas they're supposed to be putting as priorities. Also, I marry that with the fact that I know this governing body does not want to see any kind of mill increase come forward to you. We've improved critical infrastructure. We look for long-term fiscal sustainability, improve the appearance and the safety of our neighborhoods and continued commitment to that, targeting investment to drive future revenue growth, and always trying to work to improve our operational efficiency and effectiveness. At this point, I'm going to turn this over to our Chief Financial Officer, Kathleen Von Atchen, and she's going to take us through the revenue team, and then I'm going to have our budget director as well as the other assistants present key points to this budget, and then I'll come back up and close out and go through from there. Kathleen?
Good evening. Thank you very much. So we're going to talk about the revenues. First, we're going to start with the consolidated general fund. That includes the parks, the city, and the county general funds. They total roughly $233 million. And the pie chart you'll see up here breaks out each of the funding sources into a separate pie, the biggest being the property tax, and that piece is 28%, followed by sales tax at 22%, and the franchise tax at 21%. So we have a very diversified funding source, diversified revenue structure with funding sources from different categories. And so we're not overly reliant on one or another, but there have been shifts over the years, mainly where we were more reliant on property tax than we are now. So now we're more reliant on sales tax. I should also point out there's charges for services, and there's, which is also an important revenue source, and motor vehicle. So instead of consolidated, what we're presenting here are 2 pie charts with the city on one side and the county on the other. And so you should take a note that that on the county side, 66 million of it is the total of the county compared with the city, which is 160 million. So it's quite a bit larger, but the county is very reliant on property tax, constituting 61% of its total, where the city's general fund only receives about 15% of their total revenue from property tax. So the city general fund is very reliant on sales tax at 27%, but more so on franchise tax, which is now at 40%. We're going to talk about property tax a little bit. It often comes up. You all met with the county appraiser, and she gave you some general idea of how valuations are going. We now have the finalized certified valuations through our UG clerk, and it turned out that the city's valuation, total assessed valuation, ended up being 5.6%, and the county 6%. Now that includes not only commercial and residential real estate, it also includes new improvements, it also includes the state assessed utilities, and it also includes personal property tax. And each of those sources increase and decrease independently from each other. So the numbers you're seeing here are blended, a blend of all of those categories. So some of the factors is that, the valuation is very positive, 5.6 and 6%, and also the fact that we are staying consistent with the keeping the mill at the current level. Factors that may decrease the revenues received include some kind of change in the rate in which our property taxpayers pay us, which we refer to as the delinquency rate. In prior years, we've had to budget that at around the 7% level, but this past year, it came to light that actually our collection levels have improved. And so now instead of 7%, in 2018, the collection rate was 5.9%. So it decreased by over a full percentage. So in this 19 and 20 budget revenue estimate, I've changed the delinquency rate factor in my calculation for the estimate from 6.5% or so down to 5.7. So that allows for us to collect more. It doesn't really allow us to collect, it helps us plan for more. So anyhow, so you have the increase, and then you have some money, you have some factors that decrease the revenue, and as a result, the net revenue increase over the prior year for 2020 is 4.4%. All right, so we'd like to take a look at some trends, and here's a 5 or 6 year analysis of the top 3 revenue sources. The top one is property tax, and you can see this is across all UG, oh no, this is just the general fund. You can see that it had some very kind of slow or no growth in 17 and 18, and also 19, although 19 picks up a little bit. But that's because in each of those years, the commission instituted a 2 mil reduction. So even though there was a property valuation increases during those years, the 2 mil reduction reduced the level of revenue. So that's why in 17 you've only got an amount, maybe it's 0.8%, where in the other it's a negative 0.7. Now the blue line is the sales tax, and we're going to talk more about sales tax during our upcoming budget workshop. You can see in 17, it bumped up quite a bit. It increased by 26%. And that's because that's the first year in which we collected the Star Bond revenue. But there's also other reasons that go into that substantial increase in 17. Then it drops down in 18 by 10%. And so we've been studying what happened with this 10% decrease in 2018, because the funding, or the distributions from the state, were coming in very, very strong the first half of the year, and suddenly in the latter half, it dropped off. So when we meet again during our budget workshop, we're going to talk more about sales tax. And then the third source is franchise tax, which is pretty consistent year over year. In 17 and 18, the BPU, this totals around $40 million. $30 million of it is the payment in lieu of taxes related to the electrical plant, and they instituted a 4% increase to begin in April of 17, and then another one in April of 2018. So that explains the 7.8 and 7.5% increases in 17 and 18, and again in 19 as the revenue annualizes. And then it'll stable out I'm estimating, it'll stable out in 2020. We just want to provide you with a graphical display of the mill levy rates since 2015. So as you know, before you as the commission began adopting the reduction in mill levy rates, the city, which is that blue line, was at 43.4 mils, and for both 15 and 16. And then once we received the Star Bond funds, you began dropping that rate at a 2 mil level each year. That's a very conservative and prudent way of seeking tax reduction without impacting negatively the operations of the organization. So we dropped it down to 40, and then you dropped it down to 39, and that's where we're keeping it at. That's what we're proposing for 2020, to leave it at the current level. And by the way, the green line is the county, which you can see pretty much stays the same through that period. All right, now I would like to introduce you to my budget director, Reginald Lindsay, who he and his team have worked very hard on the budget document, which you just received tonight. I hope that you will read all of it, because it is fantastic, I think. I got to tell you, I'm very proud of them, and I would like to also make sure that you take a look at that capital section. It's really, really interesting. That's a new section.
Kathleen, she touched on the revenue side of the budget. I'm going to talk about the expenditure side of the budget. So we have a $394 million expenditure budget this year for 2020. We got 29 funds within that budget, and it provides over 200 services. So the pie chart here, we have the city general fund, which is $163 million, and then we also have the county general fund, which is $67 million. Those are two of the biggest funds here. And then within the enterprise fund, we have another big fund, which is the water pollution fund. It's a $60 million budget. Next pie chart here is the city general fund, which I just said was $163 million. But I'm going to drill down into it. One big portion of it is public safety. It's a $98 million budget. And then we also have community services, which is a $20 million budget, and then Public Works, which is a $19 million budget. Our other large general fund is the county general fund, and here's where we offer services to the whole county, which would include Loring, Edwardsville, and Bonner Springs. And so here we have public safety also, which is a $38 million budget, and then also we have general government, which is a $13 million budget. And in general government, we include things like legal, the appraiser's office, and finance. And then another category that's pretty large, which would be the third one, would be judicial services. It's 12% of the budget, and it's an $8.2 million budget. And that includes the district attorney's office and district courts. This next slide here drills down into 20 funds that weren't included in the city and the county general fund. And these 20 funds are $8.5 million. They include other tax levies. And in the other tax levy, the biggest fund there would be our bond and interest fund, which is a $32 million budget. And then another large fund area would be special revenue, which is $29 million. And within there, we have the dedicated sales tax, which is $11 million. Then we also have special street and highway, which is almost $8 million. And then here another slice of the pie, which is kind of here by itself, is Consolidated Parks. That's a $6.3 million budget. Then we have another set of funds, which are our enterprise funds. These are self-supported funds. They don't have any tax dollars going into them, but they do charge for the services they provide. We have 7 enterprise funds, a total $80 million. The largest one is the Water Pollution Fund, is $60 million. And then you have EMS, which is a $12.5 million budget, and then the Storm Utility Fund, which is a $4.5 million budget. So on the screen currently is the City General Fund statement. Kathleen, she touched on revenues, and I talked about expenditures. So here we can kind of see where we see the revenues we have coming in 2020, and then we also see the expenditures we have going out in 2020. So basically, one of the things we have going on is from 2020 to 2019, we had a $1.7 million increase in revenues. And on the expenditure side, from 2020, or from 2019 to 2020, we had a $2.7 million increase in revenues. And you can kind of see down here in the red, it's net change in fund balance. This basically is telling us that we're spending more money than we're bringing in, and we're going to spend into our fund balance $2.9 million this year in the City General Fund. This fund statement right here is for the County General Fund, and this setup is the one that we just looked at, in the same way. So in 2020, we can see where the revenues we had come in were $66 million. Last year, they were $63 million. We had an increase of $3.8 million between 2019 and 2020. On the expenditure side, we had a $66 million budget this year, and last year we had a $63 million budget, and that's an increase of $2.9 million. So we're spending into the fund balance $604,000, which basically also means we are spending $604,000 more than we did, or than the revenue we brought in. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Gordon Criswell, our Assistant County Administrator. He's going to talk about a few other things.
Well, now, Mayor and Commission, we get to drill down into what's really in the budget, starting with the increases to our base budget. And as you can see there, personnel, which makes up 69% of our budget, is a big driver to increase in our base budget. We are also proposing in this budget a 2% cost of living adjustment for our employees. We anticipate about an 8% increase in our health insurance cost, and we have payouts and pensions and penalties at about 5%. Another big driver to the base budget is our contractual obligations, mainly with inmate housing, which includes the farm out, medical, all in one category. Those are sort of the outliers, if you will, to our base budget increases. I'm going to talk a little bit now about investing in public safety. As you all are aware, our citizen surveys ranks public safety as either number 1 or number 2 whenever we go out and survey our citizens. So this chart just shows you across our organization the number of individuals who are in the public sector category. So we have a considerable amount of dollars invested in public safety. Everything from police officers all the way to community corrections and dispatchers. Oops, went too fast. One more. So, more specific investments in public safety. We are proposing additional investment in our building security to protect both the public and our employees in our public buildings. I'd like to highlight the dispatch center. We've done some upgrades to our dispatch center. We have made that facility much more inviting, putting in better lighting for our employees there. That is a very stressful position, and those individuals hear a lot of things when they get the calls, and so upgrading their workspace will, one, hopefully help us with retention, but also ease some of the stress that these employees sustain on a day-to-day basis. Another highlight would be repurposing our pod in the detention center so that we can move toward the double bunking, which we have been working on for some time. As you know, the double bunking should help us with our inmate farm-out cost, and we will keep moving in that direction as we move to get our new juvenile detention facility online. The courthouse fire alarm system, we have a system there now, but we are making some upgrades to that system to meet new code requirements. It's a historic building, so we have some extra upgrades we need to put in to make sure that we are code compliant. Last, I'd like to highlight our fire truck lease program. We are proposing that program to allow us to essentially buy 6 pieces of fire apparatus equipment for the price of 5, and over a 10-year period, save about $1 million. And now I'll turn it over to Melissa, and I will put it on street so you won't have to.
All right, good evening, everyone. So the next portions are primarily about infrastructure projects that I'm going to be covering with you. As you'll see at the top of the screen, we just recently discussed this in our standing committee, but this is our improvements for the new Piper High School, 131st and Leavenworth Road. We also have funding that we continue year over year for Fairfax area to make enhancements to its infrastructure, and also another major project that's moving through now is our Turner Diagonal project. And I want to highlight here that the total cost to do the reconstruction of that interchange is almost $30 million, but our UG commitment due to a federal grant is about $7.5 million. We also have money budgeted for the 7th and Central intersection to be improved in 2020, which will make going through that intersection at different times of the day easier for residents and businesses in the area. Leavenworth Road, we've been working on that starting, my first recollection was 38th Street, and we continue westward on that. And we will, in this next year, be out at 78th Street with renovations to that roadway, so making a big change in that part of the community. And then the last project-specific item on this sheet is the Minnesota Avenue repair and enhancements from 6th to 7th, which will then match 7th to 8th and kind of create some nice continuity as we head towards our new facility for our grocery store and also the new KU campus downtown. Lastly, we have increased the amount of preservation and maintenance dollars in the budget, so that'll allow more crack sealing, slurry seal, chip seal, microsurfacing throughout the community to address the preservation of our street system. On the next slide, we have 2 major projects that we've been working with you on the last few months related to flooding and flooding-related infrastructure. The first is our Armourdale Argentine levee raise on the Kaw River. This project, our portion of it primarily be related to utility relocation and land acquisition. So in the funding you see here, there's that part where we're needing dollars to be able to do those acquisitions of public properties or portions of public properties as easements. And then, of course, the betterment that we've already brought to you for approval on the Argentine levee to allow it to have more capacity. This project wouldn't be possible without the huge grant that we received from the federal government of $453 million to create better flood protection for those areas. And the next one on the sheet is an emergency repair that the commission's already seen and approved, and that's for the Turkey Creek wing wall, which is an outfall off of Turkey Creek into the Kansas River, just below the Continental Main Line for BNSF. The next slide is two very exciting projects as far as municipal geeks are concerned. The first is replacement of our package plant out at the Walcott area, which is a major project that will actually start to see construction in this time frame, which is pretty exciting for our water pole folks, as well as those of us that want to see that package plant not fail before we get it out of there. And then the last project on here is a really important one too, because you'll remember a few years ago, we had to stop burning at our Cop Point facility down in the bottoms for our sewer plant because of an EPA regulation change. And this will actually allow us to stop landfilling, which those costs have gone up exponentially just in the couple years that we've had to landfill our remains of our solid waste process, or our wastewater processes, and will allow us to then perhaps in the future sell off the renewable fuel to the market. The second to last slide I have here is on rate changes, increases, and non-rate changes. The first is wastewater. Again, our continuing efforts to work on our partial consent decree will require a 5% adjustment in our wastewater rates that we're seeking your approval for 2020. Our stormwater rate, as you all are very aware, we've been through conversations on that, and we'll continue discussing how we address some of those inequities in our stormwater rate for residents and businesses, and sort of what that looks like as we move into the year. So this budget reflects the current $4.50 fee that we charge every parcel. And solid waste, our contract allows for, does require a change to meet the CPI on a somewhat routine basis. Our last change or adjustment that we passed on was in 2015. The recommendation is for a 25-cent increase to maintain the funding for this important infrastructure that we provide to the community. Next up, the one I get really, really excited about, these are SOAR-related items. The first on here is the addition of a second abatement team. Currently, you're aware we have one abatement team that tries to cover all of our abatements for property blight in the community. That can be anything from mowing to junk and debris and other related hazards that might be on a property that need to be abated. This will get us hopefully down to around 21 days. I know the commission had sought staff to try to get us to the 14-day turnaround, which is when we're statutorily allowed to abate. This will get us closer. It won't get us there, but it's an improvement over where we're at today. And there's two items in the green part. The first part is landscape and hardscape improvements. This is UG facilities and in around them, things like sidewalks and landscape replacement. Our facilities are older. Some of that landscaping doesn't look like it did when it was put in. So we would like to work on that as part of keeping up our facilities as the commission has suggested. And the last recommendation we have is to expand the annex parking lot out at 78th and State. Now, with that, I am turning it over to Alan Howes to walk through a few more of our quality of life investments.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. The next section here will talk about some of the quality of life investments that are in this proposed budget, and it's in keeping with the Commission's focus on neighborhoods and the fact that how people experience their community and their government has directly impacted by the quality of life directly in their neighborhood. So this budget proposes some incremental, modest investments to improve quality of life in several areas. Starting with the Sidewalk Gap Program. So this is an effort to connect up sort of missing links in our sidewalk system for schools, for parks, for neighborhoods, to increase pedestrian access. This was an area that was highly ranked in the community survey. Related to that is the next one, the trail network development. The proposed budget includes funding to continue the development of a trail network, not only within our community, but also to connect to surrounding communities and create more of an integrated network to provide transportation not only for recreational purposes, but for people to get to and from employment opportunities. The proposed budget includes additional funding for safe routes to schools. As this commission has been briefed on, we've made significant progress in safe routes to schools over the last few years. This budget continues that investment and will connect up additional schools with pedestrian-friendly access. The 18th Street bus route, this is actually up and running right now. This is a federal grant that is administered by KCATA. This budget includes personnel to continue to support that. Those will be paid for by grants, but this is the first time that they will show up in a budget. It includes funding for city and Reagan Park improvements. These are the CDBD dollars that are focused on City Park and are in keeping with the NERSA and SOAR efforts in that area, as well as creating City Park as a destination attraction for the entire community. The proposed budget includes new park restrooms, and this is one of those that seems minor, but in fact has a significant impact on how people experience their parks and their quality of life, particularly if you're a family with young children or active users of the parks. So this is bringing new restrooms into those parks. And also with parks, looking to do an online park facility and program reservation system that would allow people to serve themselves for signing up for to reserve facilities, to sign up for parks programs, both online as well as in any of our community centers. So they'd be able to go to the B. Lee Center or the Argentine Rec Center and make those reservations and those signups in those community centers, which they can't do currently today. And we think this is a significant improvement, not only sort of the operational efficiency, but also the customer service experience that we give to people. Additionally, there are some quality of life investments focused around bike share. This is a Mid-America Regional Council program of which we have a small grant share. This will set up bike share in the KU Med campus area. Related to that, we have the 6th Street Bike Lane project. And those may recall who experienced the Better Block project last year. This is kind of an extension of that concept of creating a protected bike lane on 6th Street. It also ties in with the development that we're seeing in downtown and Central Avenue and creates a pedestrian bike-friendly corridor in that area. It includes Sunflower Hills golf course analysis to look at feasibility and utility of that facility for events. So not just the golf course needs, but also for weddings, that sort of thing. Are there other opportunities to generate revenue from that premier attraction in our community? Likewise, Providence Amphitheater parking lot attracts thousands and thousands of visitors to our community through the amphitheater and other associated events, and the parking lot needs to be resurfaced, and we want to make sure that the quality of the infrastructure in that location reflects the quality of the programming at the amphitheater and our community well. And lastly, the increase in master planning. So the Administrator spoke earlier about the Northeast Master Plan and the Central Area Plan. There's funding in this budget to begin to get into a regular cycle of doing master planning across the community and in all the areas so that it's not a once every 20-year thing. It becomes more of a living, breathing kind of document to help our communities plan. The budget includes several investments in technology. One of these and one of the most significant is around our permitting, and this is a project that would touch both our NRC, our planning, our public works, it would support the BPU and economic development, and sort of pulling together lots of different threads to allow for online permitting and payments, online plan submission for development plans and plan review by multiple parties, online rental housing registrations, online occupational licensing processing, allow for remote field work by our NRC employees, our code employees, so they can enter stuff directly in, don't have to come back to the office and hand key stuff that they've written down. It would allow us to get closer or to do the 311 closed loop on property code cases so that information on the status and resolution of those cases can then be communicated back directly to residents through 311. and it supports the Public Works right-of-way management efforts to better manage our public right-of-way, our public assets. And it creates really a one-stop shop for permitting across all these areas. Lastly, we have several innovation and productivity investments. These are a combination of investing in systems to support employee productivity, as well as some core sort of back office system upgrades like our ERP system, which is our core financial system that all departments use. It supports the DA digitizing and archiving project to get records into a digital format. One of the departments are particularly interested in is this HR applicant tracking system, which will give us for the first time an online job portal for people to apply for jobs, for departments to review, and to hire applicants through that. It should speed the time to hire and significantly improve the overall hiring process. The Clerk's Records Management Inventory System, this is coming out of the Clerk's Technology Fund, and supports the efforts of the clerk to manage and track all of the records that they're responsible for, not only in City Hall, but in other facilities across the community. We got progression towards a new UG phone system as an outgrowth of the investment this commission has made in fiber connectivity. We're moving away from a legacy phone system to a modern phone system. This should actually save us money significantly over time. We are in the process of migrating some of our IT infrastructure to the cloud, and the purpose of this is to reduce our capital expenditure so we have less to spend on maintaining a data center here in City Hall, and it provides additional security and redundancy efforts for our technology, for our departments who use these business critical systems. The last two are GIS Land Web Portal. This is something that's used by lots of folks in our community, including a lot of developers and architects and that sort of thing. It provides all kinds of different information about land records. It was developed in-house about 10 years ago. It has kind of reached the end of its life, and we're looking to replace that. And then the appraiser likewise is looking to expand the use of online portal tools to provide self-service, so that instead of having to get open records requests as they currently do and then responding to those back to people in a manual process that allow self-service options for people to get the information from the appraiser, as well as to do things like submit their protest or to challenge their appraisals if they choose to do that for businesses and residents. So in total, all of these projects are aimed at improving the customer service and improving our efficiency of our operations. With that, I'll turn it back to our county administrator, Mr. Bach.
Thank you, Alan and team. Just another about 30 slides to sum this up. Outside agency funding. That's a critical area for us as we look around in other areas we support. Our Convention and Visitors Bureau is one of those. A couple of years ago, when our Star Bonds came offline, one big component of the Star Bond funding was our transient guest tax piece that went into that. When that came out, the CVB asked us for additional funding. We gave them a modest increase and asked them to go back and look at what are the important areas over and above what I think they presented to us at the time. And over the last year, our members that were on their board went through, they did some strategic planning, think about where that money is being invested. And really, when I say that, this is an investment, to put money in places where it will return on our investment. So we're recommending in this budget to up their budget about $400,000. They're a little over $1 million now, which is significant, but this adds to their operating for their online advertising, what they do, but it also adds a component where they can actually go out and try to help buy in events, tournaments, and such like that, where we bring in out to our youth fields that can then turn families that come in here and create thousands of room nights. So this is an investment that in the end can bring back more money than we actually put into it in the creation of additional transient guest tax dollars, which are restricted and have to be spent on specific things like this, can't go into our general operations. Wyandotte Inc., they handle many of the people that have mental issues or crisis in our community. Really, every dollar we invest here probably saves us much more than that. So we're doing a modest increase with this group, but really dollars spent there help keep individuals out of our prison system by the treatment that they receive as they go in there. We have some increase for our K-State Extension, as well as our downtown shareholders group, and we put some money into Wyandotte Economic Development, which really is another investment to try to bring money back into our community, other investment back into our community, and we haven't given them any kind of increase for a couple of years. As we look at where we are from the tax dollar, unified government is about 46 cents on the dollar of what we expend. Our city and our county are evenly divided as to where we are in those expenses. But as I look back on this budget, as we presented to you, a couple of things that stand out for me, and that really comes to the fact that, one, trying to balance a budget, but we're looking at a negative year over year, an imbalance to where we're at. And so on the city side, we're down a little bit. As Reggie pointed out, we're about $2.9 million expending more than we're receiving this year. But that leaves us at 17% fund balance. So that's a situation where we can take that and we can stay in that for a year or two, but we need to try to keep that up. We worked hard to get our fund balance up. We don't want to fall off that, so it really puts us looking ahead from where we can be in that perspective. On the county side, we're about good, from our expenditures to revenues, so that's okay, but our fund balance is low, so we have to continue to look at efficiencies there to build that up. I'll also say, when we look at where those revenues are coming from, and I'll kind of bring that from a summary perspective, we have no mill rate increase built into this budget, so that's critical as we go forward. But those expenditures are outpacing our revenues. And I guess I'll compare that over to our friends Lewis and Clark, who are up there in that corner in the top picture. When we look at them today, they got their feet in the water down on the river. Well, much like our sales tax are down a little bit, we're hoping that'll flow on down. We'll get our sales tax back up, and we'll be in a better position in the near future, but we can't count on that right now. So we have to look at where our efficiencies are that we can do things. So within this budget, I did go into our city operations. I'm going to cut 10% away from our contractual and service, our commodities and services, in order to get us closer to where we can be from a balanced production. That was about a $2 million operating hit that came back out of all those city departments. We're utilizing some of our fund balance. That's at $2.9 million. We're looking to reduce some of our future personnel costs through attrition. Difficult situation when I come to departments and say, okay, well, you had an employee leave our service. We're not going to fill them right now. And that's where I look to efforts we'll make with this governing body as we look forward to future reductions or efficiencies through our priority-based budgeting project. This is one where we started with you earlier in the year, and we plan to move into it this fall, where we really get into the strategic cuts or efficiencies that we identify and say, this is what we want to work with, where we want to make those changes. I also note that as we look at the overall budget, and you saw the numbers that were presented to you, we have a $394 million budget. Our revenues are $25 million less than that. So I talked about the general funds. Overall, that's about when we have a $25 million difference, need to understand what's happening with that. The largest portion of that is very good, very intentional. It's work that we've all been after, like in water pollution control. That's an area where we've gone to and said, let's build up some of the revenues, spend cash toward projects. So $15 million of that comes with that specific fund, where we go out and about $8 million goes into cash funding projects in the coming year. And then another 7 is stuff we went out and we did temporary notes on, and then we'll pay those off before we take them into bonds. So that's a very deliberate, intentional move to say, less one-time expend cash. It's more efficient that way, and going and attacking that. Also, we have some transient guest tax money where we built up that fund. We go after and we can pay for items that restricted fund can pay for. That's another $1.5 million. So those are one-time expenditures that can go out and do that. But the $2.9 million on the city side doesn't necessarily fall into that category, and that's one where we have to work on to say, how can we change that trend so it's not negative over what it is positive from the year before. This budget works hard to target the spending that drives future revenue growth. I mean, that's the theme that we've been after. The mayor has said that. That's a good point that we try to take in and think about. If we're going to invest money somewhere, we put it in the streets or we put it in a specific park or area, what's the impact on the surrounding area around it, and how does that help us raise up our overall revenue flows. And also keeps that investment toward public safety, street maintenance, and our quality of life. So with that, I really come to my final, and that's, here's our budget calendar. You all have spent a lot of time with this budget already. It's not like the first time, though this is the document first coming together. We start planning on this, it seems like soon as we get out of a budget session, and we go in, we do strategic planning in the fall. We talk about what our priorities are, what we're gonna do. We have public hearings on March 7th to get input from the public as to where they think we should spend our money. And we've been through a couple of capital equipment project meetings as well to get input from everyone. I'll also note on the screen, for anyone watching, down in the lower left-hand corner, the budget is online now. I'm sure some of you have pulled it up from that standpoint, and it's there. So it's at www.wicokck.org/budget. You can go to our website at WICO-KCK and get your way there, but that's a direct link to take you to it. And in closing, I would like to thank my budget staff. If they could stand up, please. All the representatives from finance, Debbie, you as well, budget, that didn't stand up and speak today. This group works really hard to put it all together. It's a small group. They're mighty, but they do a lot of work for us, so I thank them very much. And they'll be there to help answer questions as we jump into the workshops and figure out what we need to do. So with that, thank you, man.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mr. Bach. Again, we've got a lot to digest. I think that's 3.5 inches thick. It is a thicker stock this year, so it's not as many pages maybe as before. But again, as we dig into this more deeply, take note of questions, things we need to pursue further. We've got multiple workshops to dive into this and get into real discussions. So I think coming up with the questions and sharpening those gives staff an opportunity to give us a more comprehensive answer to some of the questions we may have. So give them an opportunity to make sure they can answer your questions in public more thoroughly. So I appreciate all your work. Thank you. We are adjourned until 7. Thank you.